Okay, thank you. Welcome to the JWST webinar on the project and science operations status. I'll be talking about the status of the project and where the hardware is and what we're doing with it. And then Klaus Pontoppidan will be speaking about science operations and how to write your proposals, which is perhaps the most important thing. So starting with the NASA framework for returning to on-site work after the COVID epidemic, we at Goddard Space Flight Center are still currently at stage 4, which is mandatory telework, and Goddard is closed except for mission essential personnel. And some of the activities on James Webb Space Telescope have been designated as mission essential. And we are slowly starting to ramp up again after a pretty tight close down. But I should say that during the mandatory telework period, everything that could be done via teleworking has been done. And so we are making a whole lot of progress on lots of aspects of the project. The rumors are that we'll be going at Goddard, we'll be going to stage 3 soon, although I don't know when that's going to be. Stage 3 will still be mandatory telework, but more activities will ramp up. And we have already on the Webb project, we've started to do a little bit of mission essential travel, and I'll get to that in a little bit. Stage 2, where we go back to work, is probably a long ways off. So the Webb project COVID-19 response, first of all, throughout NASA, the top priority is the safety of the people and protecting our high-valued hardware. But some integration and test work on Webb has continued throughout the whole period out at the Northrop Grumman facility in the Los Angeles area. Due to the impacts, however, we shifted down to a single shift 5 days per week operations for working on the flight hardware at the Northrop Grumman clean room. The number of shifts per week went from 12 10-hour shifts down to 5 8-hour shifts. So you can see that there was a considerable slowdown. And of course, to maintain the safety of the people as they go in and out of the clean room with the gowning process, that's a big part of the slowdown. Once they're in the clean room, everybody is suited up anyway. But a very recent change just in the last few days has been to go back to 2 shifts per day out at Northrop Grumman. And also very recently, just this past week, about 16 NASA employees and other contractors traveled out to Northrop Grumman for a deployable tower test just last week. Following the tower test, we will be gradually ramping up the NASA presence and the number of shifts. And the next major milestones are a comprehensive system test, pre-environmental review, followed by the vibration and acoustic tests of the observatory level. And I'll show you some pictures of what that means. So here's the observatory INT overview. We started last summer by putting the telescope and spacecraft in Sunshield together. Then we did a test of the Sunshield, folded it all the way out, and then folded it back up. And very recently, we've been working on stowing to the launch configuration. Once it's in its launch configuration, we will be taking it to a vibration and acoustic test chambers, which are still at Northrop Grumman, but in a different building. Bring it back to the clean room, and then we do a complete deployment test again to make sure that Vibe and Acoustic didn't break anything, essentially, that the deployments still work. After that complete deployment, and then we fold it back up into its launch configuration, we will ship it down to Kourou, French Guiana, for the launch on the Ariane 5. Here's a more detailed look at the remaining integration and test activities. I'm not going to talk through each one. but you can look at the charts later on the video if you want to see more details. So here's a picture of the fully deployed or almost fully deployed web observatory. It still doesn't have the mirrors deployed, but we did a full Sunshield deployment last fall, and the recent progress, especially progress since the January AAS, has been to go from this configuration to the launch configuration. So I'm going to show you some of the in-progress pictures. We had folding up the Sunshield. This is a very large telescope, large Sunshield. It's the size of a tennis court. So folding it up is a very involved process. Then the Sunshield was completely folded up, and we took a little bit of time off to do a wing deployment test in this configuration. So you can see the wings are coming out, and that is one of the wings. And then there's the fully deployed primary mirror. We're not doing a secondary mirror deployment test because the gravity offloading is difficult. We had to do that when it was on its side. Then we went on to stowing up the folded Sunshield around the telescope. So 1, 2, 3, and we are finally back into the launch configuration to get ready for the vibration and acoustic test. So the remaining INT, we've done these spacecraft post-environmental deployments. We've done the observatory pre-environmental deployments. Environmental tests means going through vibration and acoustic testing as if to simulate the launch. And then after that, those tests, we will then do a full deployment of the Sunshield and the telescope. And then we will finally ship the observatory to the launch site. Launch, as I mentioned, will be on an Ariane 5. It's part of the European Space Agency contribution to the mission. And then following launch, commissioning is a complex 6-month-long process. The first month is when we do all of the deployments, and the observatory is on its way to its orbit at the second Lagrange point, 1,000,000 miles from the Earth. Following a brief period of additional cooling, we can turn on the near-infrared camera and start commissioning the telescope, start lining up the 18 mirror segments into a single phased optical surface. That's a 4-month-long process. We start by lining the mirrors up to the near cam, but then we will turn on the other near-infrared instruments, the near spec and the nearest instruments, to align the telescope to provide a good point spread function over all 3 of those instruments. Finally, when the mid-infrared instrument is at its operating temperature of 7 Kelvin, we can bring the MIRI into alignment as well. After 4 months after launch, the telescope will be fully aligned and we'll be able to start checking out all of the instrument modes. And after 2 more months, a total of 6 months after launch, we'll be able to start the cycle 1 science, with the early release science being front loaded and the GO and GTO science starting. And I can now put up a summary slide, but basically we've slowed down progress, but never actually stopped. Integration test work continues. In progress since the January AAS includes the preparation for the observatory level testing. We will soon do the vibration and acoustic tests, followed by final deployment, and then 3 months at the launch site, launch, and 6 months of commissioning. And at this point, I will turn it over to Klaus, who will tell you about preparations for the science operations.
All right, thanks, John. All right, so we can just jump right into the next slide here, Jason. Thanks. So I'll start with the science timeline. As we know, due to the great disruptions caused by the COVID pandemic, the original Cycle 1 proposal deadline was postponed. What is the top of our minds is the state of our community and the challenges that they've been facing with this pandemic, and so was not tenable to keep the deadline as it was. So we've been keeping the community updated as the situation has evolved, and we'll continue to do that. As some of you may have seen, we put out another announcement yesterday about the science timeline and the proposal deadline. So at this time, we're still not setting a Cycle 1 deadline, as the situation is still evolving, and we're still trying to get clarity, although we have more clarity than we had in the beginning. These decisions are always made in close coordination between all the partners, NASA, ESA, CSA, and Space Telescope. And we will, of course, continue to keep the community informed. So the next update is due to be provided in mid to late July. And we commit to that once we set a new deadline, we will provide the community with at least 12 weeks of notice so that everyone has time to prepare. Now, with that in mind, we also understand that everybody's situation is different. And so to help with writing proposals, we have kept the call open and made sure that proposals can be submitted and updated through through the usual channel through APT at any time. Space Telescope is operating, and all the proposal tools that we are usually supporting are available and active. This also includes the help desk, so you can write questions at any time to the help desk and get answers. So the message is, please continue working on proposals when you are able. If you have better time now than later, there's no reason to postpone proposal work. You can submit them and you can revise them at any time up until the deadline once it's set. Next slide, please. So here's just a shout out to the Masterclass local workshops in the past month and the months before the COVID pandemic. The community put a lot of effort into making and organizing proposal planning workshops, and they did an amazing job. Just as an indication of how many people were involved and attended these workshops, we shipped about 1,600 JWST pocket guides around the world. And you can still find a full list of workshops available in the links below here. The next slide. So another indication of that here is we look at how folks use our tools here. And so what you have here is the usage of the JWST exposure time calculator over time here, and you can see how we can actually track the different masterclass workshops. Each of them can be identified with a significant peak in usage. This was back in January and February when they were all very active, and so you can really see how the community efforts are to a large degree dominating the proposal planning process. Next slide, please. Now that we're not holding workshops anymore for proposal planning, I want to point out that all the resources that were available for those workshops are still available online. And so there's a long list here of resources that you can use to self-teach or keep up to date with the proposal planning process. There's video tutorials on YouTube. We still maintain a workshop in a box, which contain the resources used for the workshops. These include homework exercises, takeaway cheat sheets, hands-on exercise materials. And we also have a number of example science programs that are coordinated between the JWST documentation, the exposure time calculator, and the astronomer's proposal tool. And there's a link here that you can follow to check those out. Next slide, please. also want to point out that all approved observing programs are available on the website on jwst.stsci.edu. There's an arrow here you can see on the website where you can find them. So right now, those include the guaranteed time observations, the early release science observations, as well as the calibration programs. And once the GO programs for Cycle 1 have been selected, we'll also list them in this area. And you can find all the APT files that are used for those programs using the program information tools following the link here. And so that might provide you with some inspiration for your own proposals. And there was a final revision of guaranteed time and early release programs submitted at the end of April and were made available in updated APT files in the beginning of May. Next slide, please. So we also would like to point out still the 13 early release science programs. So these are programs that were created to provide a public data set publicly available early in the mission. And there's a list of all the programs here. Important to point out here as well that these can be used as a basis for archival proposals. So you have good ideas how to use this data. You can actually submit proposals for funding for archival research based on these programs because they're public immediately. The ERS teams all of them also presented a webinar series in March describing the programs, the science behind them, but also how they were implemented technically, again, as intended as inspiration. And you can watch those on YouTube on the JWST Observer YouTube channel. And so I invite you to do that. Those are great presentations and a really good summary of the early release science program. Next slide, please. The Cycle 1 calibration program is now also available, also through the program information tool. I would note that these are the calibration programs as we currently expect them to be. We anticipate there will be some revision of this, in particular as we learn what science was selected in GO Cycle 1. Based on that, there may be different needs for calibration, and so we will revise this program. But what we think is going to be and it's going to happen in terms of calibration is available at the moment. They're organized according to instrument, absolute flux calibration, and you can find the links to the website. So next slide, please. So another thing that's very active at the Institute at the moment is thinking beyond the proposal planning process. What will you do once you have your data? And so there's a lot of effort underway in developing data analysis tools, and that's well underway. There's a build plan for the tools. The next build is due in September. And the prioritization of data analysis software work is informed by currently approved programs, GTO and ERS programs, and will continue to be informed by GO programs once those are available. So there's some basic categories of data analysis tools that are being developed. For instance, there's a lot of development happening on core Python libraries, to a large part as part of AstroPy. And so these are basic libraries that any data analysis with JWST requires. It includes photometric utilities, spectroscopic utilities, cube utilities, FITS readers, world coordinate systems, and so on. And there's also a number of visualization tools for spectroscopy, cubes, multi-object spectroscopy, and so on. And we're expecting the first version of those to become available in September this year. Next slide, please. Also under development is a library of Jupyter notebooks using these core libraries in Python. The intent for these notebooks is to use them with training and documentation. And so you can go and download these the notebooks, and you can see how we suggest that you might use the data analysis tools. And you can take inspiration for it, or you can use the notebooks as is. So we are planning a larger number of these. 7 are currently available, and so these are public, and there's a link here on GitHub that you can go and find them. So examples of these is, how do you measure redshifts? How do you do multiband photometry, NearCam, crowded field PSF photometry, and so on. And so we also imagine that these can form the basis for future training in JWST data analysis. So once we go beyond the cycle 1 deadline, we will change gears and start focusing on training everyone to use the data. And so data analysis training is currently being planned, due to the state of the world, but also just the nature of data analysis, which is a very diverse activity. Everybody's science case tends to be fairly specialized. There will be a focus on online training opportunities. There will also be focused on just-in-time resources. So these are asynchronous resources that, like videos or like the notebooks that are available just when you need them. And all these activities, I guess, that will ramp up after the cycle 1 deadline. So next slide. And so this is just to summarize the events that are happening from the point of view of Space Telescope and the Science Operations Center at this AAS. We have a booth at STScI. There's also a NASA booth. You can go there with your questions about the project. Later today, there's a town hall, an STScI town hall, and there will also be some discussion of the JWST science timeline there. We have staff available at the booth throughout the meeting to answer any questions about your proposals. So please, join us at the chat room at the booth and talk to us. There's a new edition of the JWST Pocket Guide also available at the STScI booth, so you can pick that up and put that in your swag bag. And as always, you can find help also after the meeting at the JWST help desk. So thank you very much, and we'll be happy to take questions.
I will also comment that this afternoon at 2 o'clock, I'll be giving a top-level overview of JWST's science and the whole construction. So especially if you're new to web and want to hear the whole story, you can come to that. It is unfortunately in schedule conflict with the STScI town hall, but I think if you're already working on your web proposals, then you should go to the Space Telescope Town Hall. And if you're brand new to what web can do, then come to my talk.
Looks like we have one question in the chat. From Jamie, has the planned launch date been delayed by the coronavirus?
Okay, so yes, we are expecting a delay, but we are working through the schedule now. As I said, the INT activity slowed down, so that means we've slowed down our progress towards the launch date, which still officially is March of 2021, but we are expecting an impact to that. And NASA is working through the process of determining what the schedule will be in particular, as we start to ramp back up on the INT activities. We're going to take a hard look at that, and there'll be an announcement then when we're done with that process.
Okay, I have another one from Francisco. When and where are these data training sessions going to be available?
Right. So, so as John mentioned, the schedule is still being worked out for the mission itself, and so we're planning to start scheduling training sessions or training events at a time that is not too long before launch. So I think what probably will happen is that in the window of 6 months before launch, you will start to see various training events happening. And then of course, after launch and after commissioning, when we have real science data, there will be another campaign of data training that will use real data.
Okay. A question from, do you know when the acoustic and vibration test will begin to NGAS?
Okay, yeah, so the vibration and acoustic test at Northrop Grumman will probably be later this summer, as again, the schedule's a little bit up in the air as we're figuring out how much we can do in each week of time, and how we can work while keeping everybody safe, especially going in and out of the chamber. But we are looking at holding those tests later this summer.
Okay. No more questions in the chat box. Oh, one more came. From Megan. The acoustic and vibration test is much gentler than previous shake tests. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. Previous shake tests were done at lower levels, at lower levels of integration, so just the pieces, and those are done at the launch level, at higher than the launch level, but the final observatory acoustic and vibration tests will be done as a straightforward simulation of what we expect for launch. So the lower level parts, before they're put together, are tested at higher levels, sort of just in case, to provide some margin. But the plan for the whole observatory is to basically simulate launch, and then after that we'll do the full deployment test again to make sure it still works.
Very good. We have time for about 2 more questions. I have one. When the JWST will leave the NGAS for French Guiana?
Okay, yeah, so Webb will leave Northrop Grumman and go to French Guiana 3 months before launch, and the actual date of that is will be determined when we go through the schedule process and determine the launch date. But preparation for launch at the launch site will take 3 months.
Okay. Another question from Ryan. Are there any major updates expected to the APT between now and the anticipated cycle 1 deadline?
Right, okay. It's because this has been moved so much, it is possible that there will be some updates to APT or another release between now and the deadline. Whether that's, you call it major or not, it's not anticipated to be major, and it's not something that should prevent you from writing your proposals with whatever is the latest APT version. As always, you can always update with the latest version as it becomes available. But it is possible there will be another version.
Another question, is the JWST could study the black holes? So
yes, there's lots of capability for studying black holes, both the active galactic nuclei or quasars, and also accreting black holes within our own galaxy. A lot of the black hole science, or the energy production, takes place in dusty disks around the black holes. That light then comes out as infrared, and so Webb has a lot of capability for studying black holes, and I think one good way that you can look that up is with the ERS webinars that are online that Klaus mentioned. You can go, there's a couple of projects that will be studying active galactic nuclei in the ERS program. And so those would be good introductions to that science. But yeah, there's lots of capabilities. Thank you for joining. And there's other, as Klaus mentioned, there's other JWST activities in the next 2 days. So hope to see you around the virtual meeting. Thank you.
I agree. Thank you so much for joining.
All right.